Hovig Etyemezian. You are the head of innovation service at UNHCR, which is, of course, UN's refugee agency. I'm really glad to talk to you because I feel like humanitarian issues don't really get enough attention at summits like this. Before we talk about technology for refugee populations, let's talk about the scope of the issue right now. Very, very historic numbers of displaced people. How is that impacting your work?
Well, yes, you're right. Unfortunately, the conflicts are on the increase in the world. We have more and more forcibly displaced people fleeing conflict and war and also natural disasters. And so the first affected, obviously, are the communities themselves, but also us humanitarians who are at their service. And what's happening also is that the needs are increasing, the challenges are increasing, yet the resources we have are on the decrease. So we have this global challenge to basically respond to ever-going crises with less resources. And one of the answers to that is also how do we become more efficient? And some of the work that we're doing in innovation is to make sure that we are more efficient with the little resources that we have.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about technology, but before we get to how technology can be a solution, technology is really based on data, right? And I was struck this morning by Werner Vogels, who's an Amazon CTO, talking about the need for more data for things like climate crises. Talk about data from your perspective when you're dealing with refugee populations.
I think a good humanitarian organization, a good humanitarian worker is also judged by how close they are with communities. I have served mostly before coming to Geneva in the Middle East and the African continent. And I think my mission has always been getting to know the communities that we are serving. So we in UNHCR are very close. We serve in the front lines, building and managing refugee camps. And that proximity already creates that level of connection with refugees. Our teams speak more than 450 languages globally. So that proximity is essential. But what we've done over time is that we took that analog proximity, our analog knowledge, into the data space. So we started in the last years, I would say the last 20 years, to get better at collecting data, analyzing data so that we can make better informed decisions. That has increased. So we are in this dynamic of collecting data from refugee populations through our knowledge of them, creating feedback mechanisms. We'll talk about how we're using technology to analyze those. But data is essential because without knowing the communities, how do we serve them? And how do we translate from the analog world to the digital world on the use of data? So obviously, data is very important, but also I believe access of refugees to connectivity and access to devices is essential. Because one way we communicate with them is in the digital space. They crave that. And so the more refugees are connected, the better also that exchange happens in the digital space.
I was going to ask you about that. So, beyond tech as a tool for the humanitarian workers, in what ways can we better empower the refugee populations themselves with technology?
I would say the starting point is access to technology. So we're investing a lot. We have a Connective for Refugees global program that looks at connecting 20 million refugees by 2030. This is together with ITU, GSMA, Cisco, and others, the government of Luxembourg and Spain. This is looking at basic connectivity, but also access to devices. You start there, but you don't stop there because connectivity is a means to an end. What is the end? These populations need to be connected to their families back home. Access to opportunities is also heavily reliant on the digital space. So we want refugees not only to be connected and have tech, but also be digital literate. So we have a lot of programs that support digital literacy, all the way to skilling and education and potentially higher education and jobs. So you need to complete that circle from access to basic technology all the way to solutions that are carved by communities for communities. And one of the things that we're very proud of at the Innovation Service is that a few years ago we launched our refugee-led innovation program, which basically funds innovation ideas coming from refugee-led organizations. We receive roughly 3,000 ideas a year, a bit more than that, in more than now 40 languages. We select the best ideas and we fund refugee-led organizations for them to to solve creatively the complex challenges they face. So I think the idea of humanitarians getting better at providing access to the digital space for refugees, getting better at communicating with them in the digital space, but also put the resources at the hands of communities for them to solve the complex challenges they face. I think that combination could get better results.
So those are some great examples of AI and technology in general for good among refugee populations. What are the risks that are involved?
Yes, and that is something that we are very keen on. All of our work is centered around ethical use of technologies. The human rights values that we embody have to be part and parcel of how we do our programming. And so, for example, we use third-party messaging applications preferred by refugees to communicate with them. But we know that there's very sensitive information sometimes that could potentially be exchanged. So we avoid exchanging such information in third-party messaging apps. So data protection is key, but also another value that we have is not to test technologies on people, but design solutions with people. So instead of using a technology on a refugee community, we reverse this. We say, how about we design a solution with those communities? And the moment you have a user-centric approach, the moment you bring in the community in the design of your solution, then you're also more ethical. They are aware of what we are doing together for their good. Those elements require, the earlier point you made, proximity to populations. The closer you work with communities, the more ethical you are, but also the more clever you are in interacting with these communities ensures that you also avoid some of the major risks and pitfalls.
We're obviously at an ITU summit. We're talking about technology, but technology is a huge part of a solution. It's not the whole solution. You were talking about resources before being very limited. How do you balance that sort of the need for human interaction in each of these cases with tech tools, but making sure that there's still that one-on-one connection?
It's the human in the loop conversation that we're also very happy that all of our projects and our approach is tech is a means to an end and not an end by itself. I think the risks, and we see this happening time and again, is that when people have tech as an end goal, you end up in a situation where someone develops a solution in one part of the world and they try to parachute it in another part of the world, mostly from a profit angle. We are in the business of adapting technologies for good. And so what we do is, with our proximity to communities, use the best that the technologies could provide. For example, what we are constantly doing is identifying the challenges before we select which technology we're going to use. And by having refugees coming up with their own challenges, we guarantee that the technological investments we're making are rooted in a clear understanding of what are the challenges. If you define your challenges well, you will make better choices on what technologies you use for good.
Hovig Etyemezian, thanks for stopping by.
Pleasure.
Great to see you.